I stood in the doorway, frozen. The room was silent except for the sound of a pen scratching across paper. My father sat at the head of the long table, his hand steady as he signed the final document. Next to him was my brother dressed sharp in a navy blue suit, grinning like he'd just won a trophy. My heart pounded. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. No one answered me. Dad stood up, looked at my brother, and handed him a thick white folder. "Congratulations," he said. "The company is now yours." I felt my stomach drop. I stepped forward. "Wait, what? Yours? What about Mom? What about me?" I couldn't believe what I was seeing. After everything we went through, everything we built was just giving it away like it meant nothing. "This is a joke, right?" I asked, trying to laugh it off. But Dad didn't even blink. He turned slowly and looked at me like I was someone he barely knew. "Your brother deserves it more than you do," he said. His words cut like a knife. I took a step back, my whole body shaking. "Deserve?" I whispered. "He never even worked a single day with us. He didn't build the brand. He didn't stay up late packing orders. He didn't do anything. Mom and I did it all." My voice cracked as I spoke. My father didn't respond. He simply walked past me, brushing my shoulder like I wasn't even there. My brother shrugged and gave me that smug look he always wore when he got his way. I stood there, fists clenched, eyes filled with tears, and watched them celebrate what used to be mine. This wasn't just betrayal, it was erasing me from everything I had ever worked for. I turned around and ran out of the office building, my heels clicking loudly on the tiled floor. Outside, the sun was blinding. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to move. I needed to breathe. I leaned against a tree, trying not to break down in front of strangers walking by. I pulled out my phone and dialed the one person who would understand. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking. "Something terrible just happened." She sounded calm at first, but I could hear the worry start to grow as I spoke. "I'm coming," she said. "Don't do anything. Just wait for me." I wiped my face and looked back at the building I had spent most of my adult life working in. My name used to be on the door. Now, it was gone. As I waited for Mom, I tried to understand why. Why would he do this? We built this business from nothing, from a single sewing machine to a brand with stores in 3 cities. I remembered the nights we worked till dawn, packing customer orders on the living room floor. Dad wasn't there then. He didn't care when Mom borrowed money just to buy fabric. He wasn't there when I gave up college to help grow the business. So why now? Why give it all away to someone who did nothing? My heart burned with anger and confusion. I didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning. What Dad had done would not break might, would awaken something in me I never knew I had. But at that moment, as I saw Mom's car pull up, all I felt was heartbreak. And the worst part? She still didn't know what had happened. Before all this heartbreak, there was just me, Mom, and a dream that didn't even have a name yet. We lived in a small 2-room apartment at the edge of the city, where the roof leaked when it rained and the electricity cut off at least twice a week. Mom used to sew clothes for women in the neighborhood. Her hands moved so fast it looked like magic. I was just 12 when I started helping her. After school, I'd sit beside her and fold clothes, match buttons, and sometimes even draw rough designs with crayons. We couldn't afford a proper table, so we worked on the floor. There were days when all we ate was bread and tea, but Mom never complained. She smiled through everything. "One day," she'd say, "our name will be on something big." I didn't fully understand what she meant at the time, but I believed her. When I turned 16, Mom told me she wanted to make her sewing a proper business. She asked me to help her come up with a name, design a logo, and set up a small stall at the weekend market. That was the first time I ever felt important. I came up with the name Taybell, a mix of her name Tayo, and the word beautiful. We printed it on brown paper bags using ink and a sponge because we couldn't afford real labels. I still remember the first weekend we sold out before noon. We danced in the middle of the market like fools. It was the happiest I had ever seen her. I started managing our social media pages from an old phone. Slowly, people began to notice us. We got more orders. We bought a second sewing machine. I delayed my plans to go to university because Mom needed me, and I didn't want to leave her to do it alone. Dad wasn't around much in those early days. He said sewing clothes wasn't real business. He worked as a contractor and was always traveling. Sometimes he didn't come home for weeks. When he did, he mostly argued with Mom about money. "You're wasting your time," he told her once. "What do you expect to make from this nonsense?" Mom didn't reply. She just kept working, and I kept helping. My brother, on the other hand, was already being treated like a king. He got everything handed to him: a private school, pocket money, laptops, the best shoes. And yet, he didn't care about the business at all. He'd look at us sewing and laugh. "Is this what you call a company?" he'd say, tossing his backpack on the couch. It didn't matter. Mom and I kept going, stronger than ever. 2 years later, something changed. We were invited to a small fashion event in Lagos. I didn't think we were ready, but Mom insisted we try. We borrowed money for transport and a stall. That event changed everything. We met a celebrity who wore one of our designs and posted it on Instagram. By the next morning, we had over 50 new followers and 200 messages asking for custom orders. Suddenly, everyone wanted Taybell. That was when Dad came back home and started acting different. He smiled more. He said things like, "We need to expand." He even offered to handle our business side because we were too emotional to make tough decisions. Mom believed him. She said, "Maybe this is good. We can grow faster with his help." I wanted to trust her judgment, but deep down, something felt off. The moment Dad stepped in, things began to shift, slowly but dangerously. Once Dad joined us, everything changed at first, for the better. We opened a second shop in a busier part of town. Mom and I were excited but overwhelmed. Orders were pouring in, and we were working around the clock. I handled customer service, online marketing, even delivery runs. Mom focused on production and training new tailors. Dad said we needed to start thinking like a real company, so he helped us register the business officially, opened a business account, and started attending meetings with suppliers. For a while, it looked like the perfect team. But even then, I noticed that Dad never gave Mom full credit. When we were invited for our first interview on TV, he told the presenter he was the visionary behind Taybell, and that Mom and I supported his plan. I was furious, but Mom told me to let it go. "He's just trying to protect the family name," she said. I stayed quiet, but the anger never left me. Business boomed. In 1 year, we expanded to 5 locations and hired over 30 employees. We signed a deal with a chain store to supply ready-to-wear outfits every month. It was everything Mom and I had dreamed of. We started seeing real money enough to pay rent in advance, hire security, and even send my cousin to school. I designed our new office. Mom bought better sewing machines. We were finally comfortable, but as the money came, so did new rules. Dad began talking like a boss, not a partner. He insisted we refer to him as director. He stopped consulting Mom about financial decisions. He changed passwords. When I asked questions, he'd laugh and say, "This is business, not girls' play." The respect we once had was fading. I was no longer treated like the daughter who helped build it. I was now just an employee. Then came the biggest blow. Dad wanted to bring my brother on board. I was shocked. "For what?" I asked. "He doesn't even know how this business works," Dad replied. "He went to school. He has a degree. He can help with management." Mom, ever the peacemaker, said we should give him a chance. So we did. My brother walked in on his first day wearing an expensive suit and sunglasses like he was walking into a boardroom. He didn't greet anyone. He didn't ask questions. He just went straight to the largest office and sat down. "I need you to send me all the sales reports," he said, "from the last 3 months. I wanted to scream. He didn't even know the name of our suppliers, let alone how we handled customer complaints or order returns. But Dad backed him up. "He's here to help us grow," he said. "Trust the process." From that day on, everything started to feel like a power game. My brother made suggestions that didn't make sense. He said we should increase prices without checking customer feedback. He ordered expensive equipment we didn't need. He ignored employee concerns. When I tried to correct him, he told Dad I was being too emotional and attached. Dad called me into his office one evening and said, "You need to learn to step back sometimes. You're not a child anymore, but you're not the head either." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had been with this business from the beginning. I sacrificed everything. And now I was being told to step back for someone who just showed up? I sat in my car that night and cried. I didn't know it yet, but the cracks were already growing. And soon, everything we built would come crashing down. My brother never cared about what Mom and I built. Not even a little. When we were working from home and struggling to meet deadlines, he was out partying. When Mom needed help transporting fabrics in the rain, he said he was too busy. He mocked our dream for years, calling it a hobby and women's work. Now, suddenly, he was walking through the company like a king. Everyone stared when he entered. He wore fancy suits, carried a tablet he barely used, and barked orders like he'd been here from the beginning. I tried to stay calm. I told myself maybe he just needed time to adjust. But the truth showed quickly he wasn't here to help. He was here to take over. In meetings, he'd cut me off and take credit for ideas I had shared privately. When staff came to him with problems, he waved them away and said, "Talk to my sister. I don't deal with small issues." It got worse. My name was removed from company flyers. Emails that used to come to me were now sent to him. He began attending supplier meetings without telling me. I started hearing strange things from the staff that Dad was planning a restructure, that a new board was forming, and that some positions were going to be phased out. When I brought this to Mom, she looked shocked. "That can't be true," she said. "Your father would never make such decisions without telling us." But he did. One day, I noticed something strange. A batch of fabric we had not approved was delivered. When I asked about it, the store manager said, "Your brother ordered it. He said it's time we upgraded." I was furious. I called a meeting with both Dad and my brother. I laid everything out: how decisions were being made without consultation, how staff were confused and scared. Dad listened quietly. Then he said, "Your problem is that you don't trust your own family." Mom was caught in the middle. She kept telling me to be patient, to trust that everything would work itself out. But how could I? My brother was acting like a CEO while I was being treated like an assistant. One afternoon, I stayed late at the office, working on our monthly inventory report. I was in the back room when I heard voices. I recognized them, Dad and my brother. They were in the hallway, talking in low tones. I heard my brother laugh and say, "Don't worry, Dad. Soon, this company will be mine." My heart stopped. I froze, pressing my hand against the wall to steady myself. Dad didn't correct him. He just laughed too. That laugh burned itself into my brain. It was the sound of betrayal, the same sound I'd hear weeks later when Dad signed over everything. I stood there for a long time, staring at the spreadsheet on my screen. I knew then that I was in danger of losing everything. The next morning, I told Mom what I had heard. She looked at me, confused. "That doesn't sound like your father," she said. But I could tell something had shifted in her too. She was watching Dad more closely, noticing things she had ignored before. I started documenting everything: emails, order forms, bank transfers. I printed every file I had access to and stored copies outside the office. I didn't know what the end would look like, but I knew now. It was coming. My brother had never cared about this business, and Dad was helping him take it anyway. I stopped sleeping well. My hands shook every time I opened an email. I started asking myself, how do you fight a war when the people destroying you share your last name? I didn't know the answer, but I was about to find out. The warning signs were always there. I just didn't want to believe them. Maybe because I loved my family too much. Maybe because I didn't want to imagine my own father plotting against me. But now, looking back, it was all so clear. My login access started failing randomly. First, it was the sales dashboard, then the vendor portal. I called the IT guy, and he said the system had been updated. He looked nervous when I pressed for more details. "Your brother said to streamline access," he said quietly. The worst part was that Mom still didn't believe anything was wrong. "They're just modernizing things," she said. "Don't read too much into it." But deep inside, I knew I was being pushed out of the company I helped build. Slowly, quietly, like a shadow disappearing at sunset. One evening, I was reviewing payroll records when I noticed huge payments going out to names I didn't recognize. I dug deeper and found out that these consultants were fake companies registered only weeks ago. I printed out the files and ran to Mum. She sat down slowly as I explained what I found. Her hands trembled as she read through the numbers. "This can't be right," she said. "He wouldn't do this." But he had. I showed her the names, the dates, the bank accounts, everything. Mum said she would confront Dad, but when she tried, he brushed her off. "Why are you stressing over small details?" he asked her. "Your daughter is always looking for enemies." That night, Mum didn't eat dinner. She sat by the window for hours, staring into the dark. She wanted to believe he was still the man she married, but I could see it in her ISA was starting to doubt him too. The next day, I walked into my office and found someone else sitting at my desk. "Sorry," he said. "I was told this space is being reassigned." I blinked. "Reassigned? By who?" He hesitated. "Your brother." I didn't respond. I simply picked up my things and walked out. They moved me to a small, windowless room near the storeroom. The door barely closed, and the AC didn't work. It was their way of humiliating me. One of the staff came by later and whispered, "They're trying to frustrate you into quitting." I nodded but said nothing. I wasn't going to quit. Not after everything we had built. Instead, I started recording every conversation, every suspicious email, every change they made. I even took photos of new documents. I knew they were setting me up, but I wasn't going to let them erase me without a fight. Then, one Monday morning, I tried to log into the company banking system, and my access was gone. I contacted the bank manager, who said the account signatories had been updated. My name and Mum's were no longer there. I felt cold all over. I rushed to Mum's house and showed her the printout. She looked stunned. "This can't be. I never signed anything." We both knew what that meant. Dad had done it behind our backs. He had taken full control. I wanted to scream, cry, burn everything down, but I didn't. I just sat down next to Mum and held her hand. She was silent, her face pale. "What do we do now?" I asked. She didn't answer. That was the moment I realized we were alone. No lawyer, no friend, no outsider was going to save us. If we wanted to survive this betrayal, we would have to save ourselves. It was a Thursday morning when it all came crashing down. I remember because the sun was shining too brightly, like it didn't know my world was about to collapse. I got dressed like usual, tied my hair up, and carried my bag, ready for another day of work. I arrived at the office and noticed something strange. The security guard wouldn't open the gate. He looked confused and said, "I was told not to let you in anymore." I laughed, thinking it was a mistake. "It's me," I said. "Go and check." He made a call. Then, with shaking hands, he said, "I'm sorry, Ma. You're no longer authorized." My heart raced. I walked around to the reception door and tried to scan my ID card. It beeped red. Access denied. I stood there, frozen. Two staff members walked past me, pretending not to notice. That's when I knew it was real. I had been locked out. I called Mum immediately. "They've shut me out," I said. Her voice cracked. "Stay there. I'm coming now." I waited outside like a stranger. I saw my brother walk in through the side entrance like a boss, phone pressed to his ear, pretending not to see me. I clenched my fists and marched to the side entrance, where the receptionist stopped me. "You're not on the list," she said. "I've been told not to allow you in." My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone and started calling Dad. No answer. I called again. No answer. After 20 minutes, Mom arrived. She looked at me, confused and afraid. "Let's go inside together," she said. We walked in and I noticed how everyone went quiet. We made our way to Dad's office. He was inside, seated calmly behind his desk. He looked up at us like he wasn't surprised at all. "What is going on?" Mom demanded. He smiled and handed us 2 envelopes. I opened mine. It was a letter stating I had been removed as head of operations. No explanation, no warning, just like that. Mom opened hers and gasped. "What is this?" she asked. Her letter said she was no longer co-founder. Her role had been changed to honorary consultant. That meant she had no power, no vote, no access, no control. "You can't do this," she whispered. I never signed anything. Dad leaned back and crossed his arms. "Everything was done legally," he said. "I took care of it." I stepped forward, my voice shaking. "You betrayed us. We built this company together. Without Mum, there would be no Taybell. Without me, there would be no brand, no stores, no customers." He shrugged. "Business evolves. Emotions can't run a company." Just then, the door opened and my brother walked in. He smiled at us like he'd just won a prize. "This is just business," he said. "Don't take it personal." Mom sat down slowly on the visitor's chair. She looked like someone had taken the air out of her. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip up every paper in the room, but I stood still. "You won't get away with this," I said quietly. "You think this is the end, but it's not." My brother laughed. "We'll see," he said. We left the office in silence. The staff avoided our eyes. Some looked sad. Others looked scared. As soon as we got outside, Mum burst into tears. I held her tightly. My phone buzzed. It was a message from one of our suppliers. "Sorry to hear what happened. If there's anything I can do, let me know." I looked at Mum and said, "They took our company, but they didn't take our name. Or our fire." That day broke something in me, but it also lit a flame I would never let die. After we left the office that day, Mum didn't say a word the whole ride home. She just stared out the window, her hands folded in her lap, eyes full of tears that never fell. When we got home, she went straight to her room and closed the door. I sat on the couch, stunned. My chest was heavy, my mind spinning. We had worked so hard. We had poured our lives into Taybell, and in one day, it was taken from us. That night, I heard Mum crying softly through the wall. I pressed my ear against it and cried too. She didn't eat for 2 days. She barely spoke. I tried to cheer her, made her tea, played old music, told funny stories, but nothing worked. It was like the fire inside her had gone out. Watching her break like that made something inside me explode. I wasn't just sad anymore. I was angry. I wanted to destroy everything they built on our backs, but I didn't know how. I started digging through our old documents, the original business registration, financial records, emails, contracts. That's when I saw something strange. A year ago, Dad had asked Mum to sign a few papers he said were for tax purposes. She signed them without reading carefully, trusting him. But now I realized they were transfer agreements. He had slowly moved ownership of the company from Mum's name to his, then to my brother's, bit by bit, legally, quietly. I stared at the papers for hours, my hands trembling. I felt sick. I called a lawyer friend and showed him everything. He flipped through the documents and said the words I feared most. "It's all legal." He tricked her, but on paper, it's clean. I left the office that day with fire in my chest. If the law couldn't help us, I'd find another way. I would fight back on my terms. That same night, I confronted Dad one last time. I showed up at the house unannounced. He opened the door, surprised to see me. "We need to talk," I said. He stepped aside. I laid out the documents on the table. "You planned this," I said. "You stole from your own wife. You took everything we built and handed it over to someone who never earned it." He didn't deny it. He just looked at me with that cold face and said, "Your brother is the future. You're too emotional to run a business. You think just because you worked hard, you deserve to lead? My voice rose. Yes, because I did the work, because I believed in this dream before anyone else did. And you think that just because you're the father, you can erase me? He stood up slowly. You can yell all you want. The company is mine now, and there's nothing you can do about it. I left that house burning with rage, but something had changed in me. I wasn't broken anymore. I was sharp, focused. I went home, kissed Mum's forehead while she slept, and started planning. I wrote down everything I knew, every connection, every supplier, every customer. Taybell was their name now, but I still had the soul of the brand. I had the ideas, the talent, the passion. They couldn't take that from me. And as I stared at my notebook filled with ideas, one sentence came to my mind like thunder. If they can steal my crown, I'll build a new throne. And this time, no one would ever take it from me. I packed my things 2 weeks later and moved to a small, quiet town far from the city. Nobody knew my name there. Nobody cared about the drama I had left behind. I needed a fresh start, not just for me, but for Mum too. I promised her I would build something again, and this time, no one would take it from us. I rented a one-room apartment above a small shop and used the little savings I had left to buy a secondhand sewing machine, a laptop, and some fabric. I didn't even have a brand name yet, just a vision. Every morning, I'd wake up before the sun, draw designs, and cut fabrics with shaky hands. I made clothes for the women in the area simple, stylish, affordable. I asked every customer to give me feedback. I listened. I adjusted. I kept learning. I didn't advertise. I just focused on quality and care. Slowly, the whispers began. There's a girl who makes beautiful dresses. You should check her out. I didn't talk much. I didn't post photos of myself. I created a new name, Noma, which stood for Not One Mistake Again. I wanted a brand that reminded me why I started. Within 5 months, I had a waiting list. Women from nearby towns began visiting. Local blogs featured my work. I got emails from stylists asking for samples. And through it all, I never mentioned Taybell. Never told them who I was or what had been done to me. I was building in silence. Mum started to heal too. I'd send her photos of finished work, and she'd smile more often. She even started sewing again just a little. She'd call me and say, I made something today. Those words meant everything to me. We weren't just surviving. We were rising again. Brick by brick, thread by thread, flame by flame. 2 years passed, and Noma was no longer just a local name. I had a team, now young women I trained from scratch. My designs were featured in a national magazine. An investor approached me after seeing one of our collections online. I want to help you scale, he said. But I told him I wasn't ready. I wanted to grow on my own terms, no shortcuts, no sudden moves. I opened a showroom, started shipping across the country. Every piece had a note that read, Made with fire and grace. I didn't realize how far I had come until I received a message one evening from an old Taybell employee. Her message was short but sharp. Please come see what your brother has done. It's bad. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands trembled slightly as I replied, What happened? She sent me photos. Empty stores, angry customers, online complaints. He's destroying everything, she said. It's falling apart. I took a deep breath. I had stayed away from Taybell on purpose. I didn't want to look back. But now I realized something important me. Silence had protected me, but it hadn't healed the wound. The brand Mum and I built was dying, and not because we failed, but because we were betrayed. And maybe, just maybe, this was my moment to return. Not to take revenge, but to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The next day, I booked a ticket back to the city. I didn't tell anyone except Mum. When I told her I was going back, she didn't ask questions. She just nodded and said, Be careful, but don't be afraid. As I boarded the bus, one thought repeated in my mind. They thought they buried me, but I was a seed. And now, I was growing back with roots too deep to kill. When I stepped off the bus and saw the city skyline again, something stirred inside me, familiar pain mixed with new power. I wasn't the same girl who had walked away crying 2 years ago. This time, I was walking in with my head high, my plans sharp, and my emotions locked in a vault. I didn't call anyone. I didn't tell my father or brother I was back. I moved silently. First, I met with 3 former Taybell employees, people who had quietly left after things went bad. They told me everything. Sales had dropped by 60%. Suppliers were pulling out because of unpaid balances. Staff turnover was high. The designs were weak. The customer service was worse. And the leadership? Clueless. "Your brother doesn't understand the brand," one said. "He just wants to look powerful. But he has no vision." I listened carefully. I wasn't there to gloat. I was gathering information, just like a chess player studying the board before the final move. The next step was strategic. I contacted 2 of our former fabric suppliers and offered them a silent deal through Noma. "Don't mention my name," I told them. "Just supply me with your best materials and watch what happens." Within 2 weeks, I had outbid Taybell on their own fabric line. Then I approached one of the mall owners who had rented space to Taybell. I made him an offer. I'd pay double for the space if it became a Noma flagship store. He said yes. Quietly, I bought 15% of Taybell's stock through 3 different investors I trusted. The company was in desperate need of cash, and they were selling shares to anyone who'd bite. They had no idea it was me. I even offered to sponsor a fashion event, but under the name Noma. My booth got all the attention. Taybell's barely had visitors. It was happening. Slowly and beautifully, my return, built on calm strategy, not loud revenge. Then came the moment I didn't plan for. A group of Taybell's remaining investors called an emergency board meeting. They had seen the numbers, they had seen Noma, and they wanted change. One of them called me. "We know who you are," he said, "and we believe you're the only one who can fix this mess." I paused. This was my chance. I said yes. The next morning, I walked into the building I had been locked out of 2 years ago. But this time, I wasn't a worker. I was a silent partner, and I was now a board member. I walked into the boardroom and sat at the head of the table. Heads turned. Whispers started. Then the door opened again and Dad walked in. He froze when he saw me. My brother followed behind, still dressed like a boss, but his face went pale. For once, neither of them had anything to say. The meeting started. Financial reports were shared. Losses, complaints, declines. Then one of the investors stood up. "We believe there needs to be a leadership change," he said. Effective immediately. My father stuttered, trying to defend himself. My brother slammed the table, shouting about loyalty, but no one listened. Then they turned to me. "Would you be willing to take over leadership even temporarily?" I looked around the room at the walls we painted years ago, at the table where Mum used to sit with pride, and at the faces of men who once dismissed me. "Yes," I said, "but on one condition. My mother returns too, not as a consultant, as co-founder, as chairwoman." The room went quiet. Then slowly, one by one, they nodded. My father stood up, red-faced. "You can't do this." I turned to him and smiled calmly. "You did, 2 years ago. And now it's my turn." The meeting ended with applause. But for me, it was just the beginning. The day we reclaimed Taybell was quiet, not dramatic, not loud, no shouting, no screaming. Just papers passed across a long table, signatures written with steady hands, and the sound of my father's empire slipping through his fingers. The same man who once looked me in the eye and said, "Your brother deserves it more," now sat across from me with nothing to say. My brother wasn't even there. He had stormed out 2 days earlier after realizing that the board had removed his decision-making power. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't apologize. He just walked away. Mum stood beside me, tears in her eyes but her back straight. For the first time in a long time, she looked like herself again, strong, proud, full of light. I handed her the official letter confirming her reinstatement as co-founder and chairwoman. She looked at it, smiled gently, and said, "Thank you for fighting when I couldn't. I didn't take over Table to feel powerful. I did it because something sacred had been stolen from us. A legacy, a dream. I couldn't let that be how our story ended." I walked through the company that afternoon, floor by floor, speaking to staff. Many of them hugged me. Some cried. "It feels like home again," one of them whispered. We brought back old policies that valued people over profits. We rehired 3 tailors who had been unfairly dismissed. We reopened training programs for girls from low-income backgrounds. Mom held meetings with the design team again. She laughed during lunch. She stayed late, just like she used to. Table wasn't just a company, it was our soul, stitched into fabric. And now, it had heart again. I didn't erase my father's name from the company history. I didn't need to. His actions erased him long before I returned. The final closure came a month later. Dad called and asked to see me. We met at a quiet cafe. He looked older, smaller, like the weight of his choices had finally settled on his shoulders. He didn't beg. He didn't cry. He just said, "I made mistakes. I thought I was doing what was right." I sipped my tea and looked him in the eyes. "You thought taking something from your wife and daughter to give to your son was right?" He looked down. "I thought he needed it more. I didn't want him to feel like a failure." I sighed. "You let your fear destroy what we built." He nodded slowly. "Can we ever fix it?" I stood up and said, "Some things break forever. Some things become better because they broke." I walked out without looking back. Not out of hate, but because the past was done, and I had a future to focus on. Today, Table is stronger than it's ever been. We run it together, Mum and I. Equal partners, sisters in battle, queens on our throne. My brother? I hear he moved to another country, trying to start a business of his own. My father lives quietly now, away from the spotlight. Sometimes people ask if I forgave him. I tell them the truth. I let go of the pain, not because he deserved it, but because I did. And every time I look at our store signs, our customers, our team, I remember that no matter how hard they tried to silence me, I found my voice again, not through revenge, but through rebuilding. I never wanted to destroy him. I only wanted what we earned, and in the end, I got it back. Not because I fought harder, but because I never stopped believing that what's truly mine can't be taken forever. They took everything we built, but they didn't take our fire. From being erased to reclaiming the crown, this wasn't just revenge. It was redemption. And now, every stitch tells a story of a mother's strength, a daughter's courage, and an empire reborn. Because when they write us off, we don't disappear. We rebuild. If you loved this story, hit subscribe for more powerful tales of betrayal, resilience, and comeback victories. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in her shoes?